In colonial America, doctoring was a profession that physicians and patients today would find close to unrecognizable. Medicine, or physic as it was called, was based on ancient concepts of health and illness. Physicians commonly treated patients by bleeding them or inducing vomiting. What surgery there was took place without anesthesia. A doctor's bag at the time of the Revolutionary War contained only a few rudimentary medications. That's all there were. Foxglove, known today for its essential ingredient, digitalis, to steady an ailing heart. Opium, to relieve pain. Ginger, to aid the digestion. Even the notion of infection was absent from medicine, since the knowledge that germs cause disease would not be advanced until more than a century after the Declaration of Independence. A doctor's work was more art than science, and in most cases, not very good art at that. Medicine has progressed more in the last 200 years, indeed in the last 50 years, than in all previous human existence. And Yale University, home to one of America's earliest medical schools, has played a vital role in that progress. Yale College was established in 1701 in Saybrook, Connecticut, and soon moved to its permanent location in the small coastal city of New Haven, 80 miles northeast of New York City. In 1810, Yale College and the Connecticut Medical Society joined forces to create the 6th medical school in the United States. It opened 3 years later with a faculty of 5. Today, Yale is one of the world's leading academic medical centers. It ranks first among medical schools in per capita funding from the National Institutes of Health. More than 1,200 full-time professors teach, conduct research, and care for patients from the region and from around the world. The Yale system of medical education, with its emphasis on student research and collaborative learning, has produced leaders in every field of science and medicine. In colonial America, most people receive their medical care in the home. They often turn to ministers for healing, 18th century doctoring being primarily rooted in faith. Early American settlers saw direct ties between their physical health, or lack thereof, and their spiritual well-being. The average life expectancy was only 35 years of age, in large part because as many as 30% of infants and young children succumb to illness. Anyone during this time could call himself a doctor, since there were no licensing requirements.
Physicians were essentially artisans. Many of them had not finished the equivalent of high school. They became physicians by apprenticing themselves to a local physician.
By 1807, there were 5 medical schools all along the eastern seaboard. They were all established in connection with eastern colleges. In Connecticut, Yale College and the State Medical Society asked for permission to form the first medical school in Connecticut. It would remain the first medical school for the next 150 years in that state.
With its new faculty, including Nathan Smith and Benjamin Silliman, Yale's medical school officially opened its doors in 1813 to 37 students. Some of the faculty earned their living from the sale of lecture tickets, paid admission to their classes, rather than from salaries and tuition. Similar to most medical schools at the time, the primary admission requirement was good character. In the beginning, in order to obtain the MD degree, students attended lectures for 6 months and also spent time as apprentices to practicing physicians. In 1833, New Haven became home to the nation's 4th voluntary hospital, following the much larger cities of Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. But hospitals were very different institutions than they are today.
The hospital was not a terribly central place for the care of most Americans. The hospital, for most of that period, was a place for the sick poor, not so much for the education of students.
The middle of the 19th century was a low point for the medical profession in the United States. The proliferation of for-profit medical schools, often characterized by low educational standards and ethics, greatly increased the production of poorly trained practitioners, leading to a surplus of doctors and divisive competition for students in many states. Enrollments at established medical schools shrank. The quality of applicants decreased, and efforts by the better schools to improve the curriculum in order to attract more qualified students increased costs. Yale was no stranger to these challenges.
There were plaintive pleas to the Yale Corporation saying that we desperately need money. And it was really the review by Flexner that sort of made people relook at the school and what they had.
Abraham Flexner was a respected educator whose assessment of the overall quality of medical schools and frank recommendations for improvement would influence American medicine for the next 100 years. He visited each of the 155 medical schools then operating in the United States and Canada before issuing his landmark report to the Carnegie Foundation in 1910.
The Flexner report, it was really an expose of the shortcomings of American medical schools across the board. In the decade after that, half of the medical schools in the United States simply shut their doors.
The only two medical schools in New England that were deemed worthy were Yale and Harvard.
Flexner favored university-affiliated schools, like the one at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, that would commit to both teaching and research, especially those with large endowments, or at least the potential to raise funds to improve their research facilities.
Once the Flexner report came out, the tide of philanthropy shifted to education. Largely medical education, but general education as well. The Rockefellers gave Flexner $50 million to distribute.
That really woke Yale up, woke alumni up, and the Rockefeller Foundation said to Yale and to other universities that were being saved, you can have our money basically on three terms. First, your faculty have to be on full-time employment as professors of medicine, not with a private practice. Second, you have to have access to the clinical material, which means patients. And then third, you've got to match our money.
To assure greater access to patients, a more formal agreement was reached in 1913 between Yale University and the New Haven Hospital. Connecticut's first teaching hospital was now established. During the first decades of the 20th century, American medicine had undergone a major transformation. Medical licensing was now required to become a physician. Hospitals were not only for the sick poor, but also for the community at large, and for medical education. And research had become central to the enterprise. Now on a much firmer footing, the Yale School of Medicine was poised for a sustained period of growth and innovation. Propelled by 2 world wars and a corresponding expansion of research on the treatment of battlefield injuries, infections, and other diseases, American medicine began to address the demands of a modern world. Yale School of Medicine produced landmark medical innovations during this time.
Innovation in medicine finds its way first to academic medical centers, where the innovation is developed, studied, experimented upon, refined, and improved. Innovations that Yale School of Medicine has been responsible for over the years include the development of chemotherapy, the first use of penicillin, the development of technology in the neonatal ICU environment.
In 1911, child development pioneer Arnold Cassell founded what would become the Yale Child Study Center. The medical school received its first federal grant in 1919, a turning point in its development as an engine for research. Innovations in medical education were also coming, beginning with the hiring of a new dean, Milton C. Winternitz.
Then in 1920, another milestone, Yale Corporation recruited Dean Winternitz, who has been described as a steam engine in pants.
So as dean, Winternitz really oversaw profound changes at the medical school. Changes to the physical plan, changes to the faculty, changes to the curriculum. One of the important changes to the curriculum that he developed was what became known as the Yale system.
And it provided three really important things. One was a flexible, cohesive, and collaborative learning environment. Two was the mentorship that they received from our faculty. And the third is the thesis.
I definitely chose to come to Yale for the Yale system, which has been as remarkable as it was advertised. It gives us the flexibility to really work with our classmates and to interact with professors and not be so concerned about numerical grades.
The key to medical education today is to teach your students to be self-learners. They must be able to read the literature, critically judge the literature, determine what has changed and what's true, and whether they should modify their practice accordingly.
Student Research Day is the culmination of the students' participation in their thesis.
So now we send those 38 back, so I send them back to Adam in the wet lab, and he'll validate them on a smaller scale.
So the thesis does many important things. It has our students participate directly in scientific discovery and in learning things that will advance the practice of medicine. In order to do their thesis, our students work very closely with the faculty mentor. And this close working relationship becomes so important to our students.
I worked with Dr. Edelson. He's a world expert in cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. And what never ceases to amaze me is the amount of time that he's willing to spend with medical students.
One of the things that was special about the patients that we identified with these mutations is the fact that they don't seem to be responding to photopheresis and systemic therapies that
In addition to educating medical students, the school graduates dozens of PhD students each year in the biomedical sciences, along with public health professionals, physician associates, hospital residents, and research fellows. The Medical Library houses one of the country's finest historical collections, including pioneering neurosurgeon Harvey Cushing's unique collection of clinical specimens, drawings, and photographs.
The Medical Library's collection is considered really one of the best in the world.
Throughout the 20th century, the school developed into a major center for research in the biomedical sciences. It also took advantage of its close proximity to the main Yale campus, located just a few blocks away, and home to many of the world's leading scholars in the humanities. For more than 2 decades, the Humanities in Medicine program has connected medical students and scholars with writers, artists, historians, and others with a unique perspective relevant to medicine and the human experience of illness.
So this is how Vesalius started. Really, was with these sheets which were prepared for teaching.
The importance of humanities in medical school cannot be emphasized enough. With the things that you see on the ward and the emotions that you experience, the humanities is definitely a place, a venue that we've used to sort of cultivate these emotions and express them in different formats.
Many students come here as well-trained musicians, and so established now 2 years ago as the Yale Medical Symphony.
By the 1960s, a higher standard of living and new public health measures meant that Americans were living longer. The growing number of older citizens and the introduction of Medicare in 1965 created a much larger patient base, a larger demand for doctors, and a sustained period of expansion for medical schools and teaching hospitals. Yale's medical school grew in this period from a handful of departments to more than 24 today, and from fewer than 100 full-time faculty to more than 1,200.
There are 28 departments here at the medical school. About a third of them are basic science departments. That is, they do not participate in patient care directly. Their role is to teach medical students, teach graduate students, teach postdoctoral fellows fundamental skills of doing basic research. They represent fields including genetics, cell biology, immunobiology, physiology, pharmacology, neurobiology, and so on. The other 2/3 of departments are clinical departments which have an extra mission on top of teaching and research, and that is direct clinical care of patients.
The close connection between bench and bedside has led to major innovations in clinical care at Yale over the decades.
Pharmacologists Alfred Gilman and Louis Goodman were working during the 1940s doing wartime research on nitrogen mustards, which were poison gas compounds, essentially. And what they discovered was the killing action of the nitrogen mustards actually worked to shrink tumors in cancer patients. Their research really marked the beginning of cancer chemotherapy.
Yale was designated one of the first comprehensive cancer centers by the National Cancer Institute in 1974. 35 years later, in 2009, Smilow Cancer Hospital at Yale New Haven opened as one of the most advanced clinical centers for cancer care in the world.
We're working hard to really create the very best cancer hospital that we can. A cancer hospital which is innovative, a cancer hospital which is bringing new treatments to patients, children, adults, patients who have a broad variety of malignancies, making sure they have access to the very best care and the very cutting-edge research.
I think innovation in medicine is an important part of the practice of medicine. I think that's what makes the Yale School of Medicine unique. There's a community of scholars, physicians and scholars that are trying to understand the most basic mechanisms of disease and understand the details about patients, and to use that information about patients to inform the research and use advances from the research to inform better patient care. And what we're trying to do is understand what are the biomarkers or what are the genetic markers that might let us predict.
And one of the things about Yale is Yale has always been a place that has had science at its very heart.
Science plays an increasingly important role in medicine. Medicine is a study of biological phenomena going wrong. So what you see really is that scientific discovery leads to technological innovation and application to medicine itself.
A 20th century example of science applied to medicine can be found in the work of Dorothy Horseman at Yale.
Dorothy Horseman solved one of the key problems that had confounded scientists working on polio for decades. And she basically went back and took a look at an earlier stage than anyone had before at the blood of polio patients and realized that the virus had infected the bloodstream, but it hadn't been discovered before because everybody had tested too late and the virus had already been destroyed by the antibodies in the person's bloodstream.
Building on the work of Horseman and others, the first polio vaccines were developed, and a disease that devastated 20,000 lives a year in the U.S. alone was virtually eradicated.
Yale is a special place in that I think there's more communication here across fields, both between the different fields of basic science and between basic science and people who are primarily involved in the clinical practice of medicine.
Other seminal discoveries by Yale researchers have led to the development of new drugs and therapies. The HIV/AIDS drug Narrated was discovered by Yale pharmacologists. A Yale team developed and tested the first insulin pump for diabetes. Lyme disease was identified by 2 Yale physicians in 1975. The medical school has focused its translational research efforts toward better understanding transplant rejection, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis, and immune disorders.
Yale has played an enormous role in the innovations that have happened in medicine over the past 50 to 100 years. Some of the fundamental discoveries of understanding how genes work have been made at Yale.
We took the approach of using extreme outliers in the population, patients who have extremely high or extremely low blood pressure, and using tools of the Genome Project to try to understand the specific causes of these disorders. And this has taken us from discovery to new applications of existing pharmaceutical agents to treat patients, to new recommendations from the Institute of Medicine for the reduction of salt in the diet of every American. Biggest issue in this family is whether we want to go ahead and do the whole exome sequence or not.
Key milestones at the Yale School of Medicine include development of the first transgenic mouse and important discoveries related to autism, dyslexia, Tourette's syndrome, and hypertension. In addition, fundamental discoveries such as the inner workings of cells and how proteins fold into their unique three-dimensional shapes were made at Yale. The Yale Stem Cell Center, dedicated to understanding the basic biology of cells that give rise to every kind of tissue in the body, was created in 2006.
Well, you know, success breeds success in the academic world. So when you have a great institution like the Yale School of Medicine with a great history and a great reputation, embedded in a great university that's regarded as one of the tops in the world, it really does help in recruiting faculty.
And we expect that every faculty member coming in ought to be a leader in the world in their field, and we try to instill that same enthusiasm and spirit in our students.
I'm really interested in public health issues, so I really would hope at some point in my future to be sort of working in the Department of Health of some sort, even with the WHO or with the CDC or at the NIH.
And one of the great things about working in a university is working with young people. That's one of the things I've really had probably most pleasure from.
Last year in the United States, there were over 50,000 applicants to medical schools. We had over 4,000 applications. We did 800 interviews, and from those 800 applicants, we selected our 100 medical students.
So our class size is 100, and I think that really fosters a collegiality in our community. We learn from each other, and we push each other forward.
Most students at the School of Medicine volunteer a portion of their time to community activities, teaching human anatomy to local high school students, working in the downtown evening soup kitchen, or providing care under the supervision of faculty physicians in the student-organized Haven Free Clinic and Wednesday Evening Clinic. Students put out a literary magazine, perform with the Yale Med Players Theater Group, and in the second year, put on a highly entertaining, if somewhat irreverent, review, both celebrating and mocking their favorite professors and fellow students.
We have great students at Yale. They have an independent spirit, and they are passionate about their careers. Our students want to make a difference in the world. They want to contribute to the future of medicine in some important and meaningful way.
Excellent students require exemplary teachers. And Yale School of Medicine's faculty are well represented within the National Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Medicine, and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And they've been recognized internationally with scores of prizes and awards, including the Nobel Prize.
The Yale School of Medicine has an extraordinary level of excellence among its faculty. You know, their work I think, sets a standard that everyone aspires to, and people have tremendous respect and admiration for the really great leading scientists. And we literally have dozens of such people here at the Yale School of Medicine. It's a striking assembly of talent.
That's a beautiful result because it deals with that paradox that you've got one receptor giving two possible outcomes.
Absolutely.
This department has been responsible for quite some interesting discoveries. The discovery of how the innate immune system works has been one of the triumphs of the last decade or two. And it really started here.
We were at the leading edge of using genetics to unravel complex genetic traits such as high blood pressure. We were the first university in the world to succeed in doing a genome-wide analysis of relating common variants to a common disease with macular degeneration. We were the first university in the world to sequence all of the genes in the genome in order to make a clinical diagnosis.
The Yale Center for Genome Analysis is one of the advanced core facilities making state-of-the-art scientific instrumentation available to faculty and students across the university. Other core facilities provide tools for RNA interference, molecular and cellular imaging, small molecule screening, and other cutting-edge technologies.
I think the biggest transformation we're going to see in the cancer area is this concept of molecular profiling, so that patients, when they come through the door of Smilo, will have a sample of their tumor taken, and we will then look for all the genetic abnormalities that may be present.
The acquisition of our new West Campus in West Haven, Connecticut, just 7 miles from the main campus, is given us an opportunity to build interdisciplinary, collaborative research programs at the cutting edge, divorced from the ordinary ordering of academic departments, and instead focused on important thematic areas of science that will be very valuable in the future.
Further from home, Yale School of Medicine's international partnerships with Fudan University in China, Makerere University in Uganda, and many others will extend the knowledge gained by Yale scientists to benefit patients around the world.
Medical school faculty have collaborations all over. We have a major one in London with the University College London Medical Center. But there are, in the developing world, a great many collaborations going on. We have people doing medical research essentially on every continent in collaboration with scholars and investigators everywhere.
In addition to that, because we bring so many people from all over the world here, train them, and then send them out to university positions all over the world, we have true global reach in the impact of the work that we do.
As Yale School of Medicine begins its 3rd century, it seeks to educate the future leaders of American medicine while applying cutting-edge scientific research to the goal of making people healthier.
This is one of the most exciting times to be in medicine from many, many viewpoints.
We will be able to be much more specific in our diagnosis and treatment. And the benefit to individual patients will be they will have treatments that are tailored to their specific inherited abnormalities. They will have early diagnosis of inherited predisposition that will enable them to either change lifestyle or change therapeutics in ways that will give them better therapeutic outcomes because we anticipate there will be new medicines that will be more selective, of greater efficacy, and reduced side effects.
Probably the biggest impact we'll have on the future will be through the students that we educate. They will be the scholars and leaders of tomorrow, and they will be a part of the transformation of medicine in the future. In addition, our researchers will continuously redefine the cutting edge of science, and our clinicians will practice at the cutting edge and do the clinical research that defines future trends in clinical medicine.
The number of resources available to us is nearly unlimited. Anything that we can put our minds to, we can create here, and it's just such a fascinating and wonderful place to be able to have these opportunities available to us.